I never imagined it would end like this. Not after everything I had done for him. For Jake, my son. I thought I had given him everything, my time, my love, my energy. I gave him my life, and I thought it would be enough for him to understand, to care for me in return when the time came. For 60 years, I poured myself into being a mother. I worked long hours as a nurse, sometimes exhausting myself, just to make sure Jake had a future. I watched him grow up, always trying to give him more than I had, always pushing him to achieve things I never had the chance to do. My dreams, my ambitions, they all centered around him. I would do anything to see him succeed. When Jake met Lauren, I saw the spark in his eyes. She was beautiful, confident, and ambitious, just like him. I wanted to support them both, so I did everything I could to make their life easier. I sold my house, the one I had lived in for decades, and gave them the money to help buy a gorgeous cottage in a prestigious neighborhood. I told myself it was worth it. They were my family, and nothing meant more to me than seeing them happy. I didn't mind not having much for myself. I thought they needed the luxury, the comfort. I'd spent my life living in a modest house, and now I wanted them to have everything they deserved. It was supposed to be my gift to them, my final act of love and devotion. But what did I get in return? Betrayal. It all began when I lost my job. There was nothing I could do. The hospital had been cutting costs, and when they laid off a significant portion of the staff, I was one of the unlucky ones. I had worked there for over 30 years, dedicating my skills and my heart to helping others. I never thought it would end like this, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. When I told Jake about my situation, I didn't expect what happened next. He and Lauren were sitting at the kitchen table, discussing something when I brought it up. I had been crying, trying to hold myself together, not wanting them to see how broken I felt. I thought they'd be sympathetic, that they'd offer support. But instead, Jake looked at me with a distant, cold stare. Lauren, who had always been polite, now seemed so distant, so disconnected from me. "Mom," Jake said. His voice clipped. "I don't think it's going to work out. We can't keep you here anymore." I was stunned. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. I thought they were family. I thought they understood the sacrifices I had made for them. And yet, all they saw was someone who was no longer useful to them. Someone who didn't fit into their new, shiny, perfect life. "You're just not fitting in with our lifestyle," Lauren added. Her voice was smooth, almost too sweet, as if she were speaking to a stranger. There was no warmth, no empathy, just coldness. I tried to protest, but the words got stuck in my throat. My mind raced, but I couldn't think of anything that could make this right. I had given them everything, and now they were telling me to leave. It felt like I was being cast aside like an old piece of furniture, no longer needed, no longer wanted. Jake's face softened for a moment, but only for a second. Then he continued. "We've looked into it. We found a place for you. It's a senior living facility. It's not much, but it's affordable." I didn't know how to respond. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This wasn't what I had imagined. I had dreamed of growing old surrounded by my family, enjoying the years we had left together. But now, it felt like they were pushing me away. "I know it's not ideal," Jake continued, his voice suddenly filled with the awkwardness of someone trying to justify the unjustifiable. "But you'll be fine there. It'll be better than, well, living with us." Better than living with them. I couldn't believe it. They weren't even trying to understand how this felt for me. I had raised Jake. I had put everything I had into making sure he had the best life. And now, I was being cast out like I didn't matter. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to yell at them, to tell them how hurt I was. I wanted to scream at them for everything they had taken from me, for everything they had done. But I didn't. I bit my tongue. I knew something they didn't, something that stopped me from saying what I truly felt. I didn't have the strength to argue. So I turned, walking out of their house, my footsteps echoing in the silence that had grown between us. As I left, I heard them talking behind me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I didn't want to see their faces again, not after what they had done to me. As I drove away, I could feel the weight of it all. The betrayal, the heartbreak. But deep down, I knew I had to keep my composure. I had to act like everything was fine, like I was okay. Because in a way, I knew something that they didn't. I was strong. I could survive this. I had survived worse. And no matter what, I wasn't going to let them break me. I would find my way, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Even if it meant walking away from the people I had loved the most. I had my pride, and I wasn't going to let it go. They thought they had won, but they hadn't seen the last of me. Not by a long shot. The weight of the secret had always weighed heavily on me, but until recently, it had been manageable. I had chosen to carry it alone, believing it would spare me from unnecessary complications. The money, the inheritance. I never imagined that one day it would become the very thing that would lead me into a battle of revenge. Many years ago, I had cared for Elizabeth Wainwright, an elderly woman who had been more than just a patient to me. She had been kind, graceful, and full of wisdom. I had spent countless hours by her side, watching over her as her health deteriorated. She had been one of the few people who had truly trusted me, and I had come to care for her in ways I never expected. But it wasn't until after her passing that I learned the full extent of her trust in me. Elizabeth had left me $12 million, a fortune that I had never asked for and certainly never expected. She had insisted that I take it, saying I had earned it with my kindness and dedication. She had no children or close relatives, and after her death, I became her only beneficiary. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. The money felt foreign, uncomfortable even. I had never been motivated by wealth, and suddenly this enormous sum was thrust upon me. I kept it hidden. I kept it from everyone, including my son, Jake. I had my reasons, of course. Jake had always been a bit difficult. Ambitious, yes, but in a way that left me questioning his true intentions. We had never been especially close, but after his father's death, I did my best to nurture what was left of our family. I didn't want the inheritance to change our relationship, so I kept it to myself. It was easier that way. But now, with everything that had happened, I realized how naive I had been. Jake had shown his true colors. The mask he had worn for years had finally slipped, and I could no longer ignore the signs. His greed, his manipulations, his coldness. It was all too much to bear. The tipping point had come when he demanded that I sell the house and give him a larger share of the inheritance. He spoke of his needs as though the world owed him something. He didn't care about me, only what he could extract from me. That's when I knew that the time had come. I could no longer keep the secret of Elizabeth's inheritance. I had to make a change, and I had to do it quickly. I moved into the best hotel in the city, a place where I could have peace and privacy. The luxurious suite, with its grand windows overlooking the city skyline, became my sanctuary. I felt the weight of the decision I was about to make pressing down on me, but it was a decision that had been building for years. Now I was ready to take control of my life, to stop hiding, to take back what was mine. I hired a lawyer, someone I could trust to guide me through the legal process. I knew that Jake would fight me for the inheritance once he learned of it, but I wasn't afraid. I was prepared for whatever he had planned. The lawyer assured me that the will was solid, that Elizabeth's wishes were clear. Jake couldn't contest it without solid proof of wrongdoing, and there was none. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to give me the courage I needed. As the days passed, I began to put my plan into action. I would use this inheritance to secure my future. But I also had a deeper purpose, a more personal mission. I wasn't just going to let Jake walk all over me anymore. I had spent too many years sacrificing for him, trying to make up for the shortcomings of his father. But it was time for me to focus on myself. I knew what I had to do. I would make sure Jake understood the consequences of his actions, and I would make him realize that he couldn't simply manipulate his way through life. I would make sure he understood that I wasn't the same woman he had taken advantage of all these years. There was a thrill in this new sense of power, a feeling that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I had always been the one who gave, the one who put others first. But now, for the first time, I was putting myself first. I was no longer a victim of circumstances. I was taking control of my fate. It was strange, almost surreal, to think of the money as a tool for my revenge. But that's what it was. The $12 million had become a symbol, a way for me to gain the upper hand. It was the key to my freedom. I hadn't decided exactly how I would confront Jake yet, but I knew it had to be done on my terms. I would no longer allow him to think that he could push me around, that he could dictate the terms of our relationship. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, and it was about finally standing up for myself. I spent the next few weeks preparing, consulting with the lawyer, making sure everything was in order. The hotel room had become a refuge, a place where I could think clearly and act decisively. Every night, I would sit by the window, gazing out at the lights of the city below, planning my next move. I could feel the tension building inside me, the anticipation of what was to come. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Jake would come for me. I was sure of it. But I would be ready. I would make sure he knew that I wasn't the same person I had been before. I would show him that my love for him wasn't unconditional, that I had limits. And when the time came, I would take what was rightfully mine. The game was changing, and this time, I was in control. I had planned this moment for weeks. Every detail, every word, every calculated move. The penthouse suite of the Grand Riviera Hotel had become my war room, a place where I strategized, where I transformed from Grace Harper, the discarded mother, into Grace Harper, the woman who would no longer be ignored. The morning of my visit to the luxury real estate agency, I dressed with purpose. A tailored navy blue suit, a silk blouse the color of champagne, and heels that clicked with authority against the marble floors. My hair, once tied back in a simple bun, now fell in soft waves, styled by the hotel's concierge. The platinum credit card Elizabeth had arranged for me rested in my wallet, a silent promise of the power I now held. I knew Lauren worked there. Of course I did. The agency, Evercrest Estates, was the most prestigious in the city, catering to the elite. Glass walls, chandeliers that cost more than my old yearly salary, and agents who moved like sharks in designer suits. I walked in with my chin high, my lawyer's words ringing in my ears. "You're not asking for permission anymore, Grace. You're taking what's yours." The receptionist barely glanced up until I said, "I'm here to see the listings for the waterfront villas. Budget, $3 million. Her eyes snapped to mine, then flickered over my outfit, my posture, the way I held myself. Recognition didn't dawn, just the quick reassessment of someone who'd misjudged a client's worth. "Of course, madam. Let me find an agent for you." And then, like fate itself had scripted it, Lauren appeared. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? The last time she'd seen me, I'd been in a worn-out sweater, carrying a suitcase out of her house, the one I'd bought. But when her gaze finally landed on my face, her step faltered. Her perfectly glossed lips parted. Grace! The way she said my name, like it was a stain on her tongue, almost made me smile. Lauren, I replied, smooth as the marble beneath us. What a coincidence! Her shock hardened into something colder. She recovered quickly, slipping into her professional mask, but I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. None of them had. You're looking for a property. Her voice was tight, her smile brittle. I am. The Ocean View Villas, specifically. I let the words hang between us, watching her process the implications. Those villas were for the wealthy, the untouchable, not for the woman she'd tossed aside. Lauren's polished facade cracked for just a second. I didn't realize you were in the market for something like this. Life is full of surprises. I held her gaze. Shall we tour one? She hesitated. I could see the war in her, professional duty versus personal disdain. But money won. It always did. Of course. Right this way. The villa was everything I'd dreamed of. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a kitchen that gleamed under the California sun. Lauren recited the details like a script, her voice flat, her fingers clutching her tablet like a shield. And this is the primary suite, she said, pushing open double doors. Walk-in closet, private balcony, ensuite with a soaking tub. I stepped inside, running a hand along the silk drapes. Lovely. A beat of silence, then unable to resist. How exactly can you afford this, Grace? I turned slowly. Does it matter? Her jaw tightened. We require proof of funds before proceeding. I reached into my bag and slid out the bank statement, the one with the $12 million balance. Her eyes darted to the number, and for the first time, real fear flashed across her face. You, she swallowed. Where did you get this? Does it matter? I repeated, softer this time. Lauren's composure shattered. You think you can just waltz in here and what? Show off. This is a joke. You're a nurse. You don't belong here. The venom in her voice was familiar. It was the same tone she'd used when she told me I didn't fit their lifestyle. I closed the distance between us, my heels clicking like a countdown. Actually, Lauren, I don't think you belong here. I turned to the young agent lingering in the doorway, a wide-eyed woman who'd been shadowing us. What's your name? Monica, she stammered. Monica, I'd like you to handle my purchase. Lauren's services are no longer required. Lauren's face turned scarlet. You can't. I just did. Monica looked between us, terrified but intrigued. Lauren opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. The papers were signed by Sunset. $3 million, wired without hesitation. As I initialed the last page, I glanced at Lauren, who'd been forced to watch from the sidelines. Her hands shook. But I wasn't done. One more thing, I said to Monica, pulling an envelope from my bag. Could you ensure this is delivered to the courthouse today? Monica took it, curious. Of course, Ms. Harper. Lauren's breath hitched. What is that? I smiled. A lawsuit. For the return of my house, the one I bought for you and Jake. Her gasp was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. As I walked out, the ocean breeze brushing my face, I finally let myself breathe. Round one goes to me. I should have known Jake wouldn't take defeat quietly. The first video appeared 3 days after I filed the lawsuit. I was sitting in my new villa, sipping coffee by the infinity pool, when my phone buzzed with a notification, a tagged post. Jake Harper's latest video, The Truth About My Mother. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second before I pressed play. There he was, my son, my only child, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed, staring into the camera like a wounded animal. "I never wanted to do this," he began, voice cracking. "But after everything that's happened, I can't stay silent anymore." The performance was Oscar-worthy. He spun a story of neglect, of a mother who'd abandoned him the moment money entered the picture. "She left us with nothing," he whispered, wiping fake tears. "Now she's living in a mansion while I struggle to pay bills. Is this what family means?" The comments were a tidal wave of outrage. Disgusting. How could a mother do this? Money changes people. She's a monster. Poor Jake. He deserves better. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. I'd expected this. Of course I had. Jake had always been a master manipulator, his father's son through and through. But this time, he'd made one fatal mistake. He'd forgotten who really held the receipts. I called my lawyer. "It's time." Then I opened my laptop and created an account on the same platform Jake had used. Grace, Harper, Truth. No frills, no dramatics, just the facts. I uploaded 3 things. 1. The audio recording from the night they'd kicked me out. Lauren's voice, crisp and cold. "She doesn't fit our lifestyle. Put her in a home." Jake's reply, "It's not like she'll live forever anyway." 2. The bank statements. Every tuition payment, every mortgage check, every cent I'd poured into his life. 3. The lawsuit documents, highlighting the clause where I demanded my house back. The caption was simple: "Judge for yourself." I hit post. It took less than an hour for the internet to explode. Jake's followers flooded to my page. The comments shifted like quicksand. Wait, she paid for his college? His house? Did he just try to gaslight his own mom? That audio. Holy shit. By noon, Jake had deleted his original video. By 3 p.m., someone had spliced his tearful monologue with the audio of him mocking me. The meme went viral. By sunset, Lauren's Instagram was flooded with demands. "Explain this. You're a monster." I sat back, watching the dominoes fall. Jake panicked. He went live again, this time sweating under the studio lights of his living room. "That audio is edited," he shouted. "She's twisting things." But the damage was done. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times reached out for comment. A finance influencer dissected my bank records, proving every payment. Even Lauren's high society friends started distancing themselves, their perfect reputations at risk. Then came the final nail in his coffin. A former colleague of Jake's slid into my DMs. He bragged about cutting you off at the office holiday party. I have proof. The attached video showed Jake laughing, champagne flute in hand. Old ladies are so clingy. Mine thought I'd actually take care of her. Like, "Hello? You had your turn at life?" I didn't even need to post it. Someone else did. Jake's employer called an emergency meeting. His sponsors dropped him. The hashtag number Jake Harper is over party trended nationwide. And through it all, I said nothing. Let the world see him for what he was. Let him drown in the mess he'd made. I closed my laptop, the echoes of his downfall ringing in the silence of my villa. The ocean outside was calm, unbothered. Somewhere in the city, my son was learning a hard lesson. You don't betray the woman who gave you everything, not unless you're ready to lose it all. The day the court ruled in my favor, I didn't throw a party. I didn't call the press. I sat alone on the terrace of my villa, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, and let the silence settle into my bones. After a lifetime of noise, of giving, of pleading, of hoping, the quiet was a gift. The judge's words had been final. The property at 2147 Willow Lane is to be returned to Grace Harper, effective immediately. My house. The one I'd sold to give Jake and Lauren their dream. Now it was mine again. I'd expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt something softer, heavier. Jake didn't go quietly. The day after the ruling, he showed up at the villa, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. The stench of alcohol clung to him like a second skin. "You ruined me," he slurred, swaying on his feet. "My job's gone. Lauren left. Was this your plan all along?" I didn't invite him in. "No, Jake," I said, my voice steady. "My plan was to love you. Yours was to exploit it." He screamed then, a raw, guttural sound, and hurled his phone at the gate. It shattered against the iron bars, a fitting metaphor. Lauren, ever the pragmatist, filed for divorce the next week. Rumor had it she'd moved back in with her parents, her high society reputation in tatters. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd once sneered at my lack of status was now scrambling to salvage her own. I sold the villa, not out of spite, but because it was never meant to be a weapon. It was a stepping stone. The profit I made funded my next chapter, a cottage by the sea in a sleepy coastal town called Haven Cove. The locals knew me simply as Grace, not Jake's mother, not the woman from the viral scandal, just Grace. It was liberating. I turned the sunroom into an art studio where I painted seascapes and drank too much tea. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier named Barnaby, who followed me everywhere as if he knew I needed the company. And then, one rainy afternoon, I did something I'd never dared to before. I started a foundation. Harper's Haven was small, unassuming, a refuge for seniors who'd been discarded by their families, just like I had. We offered legal aid, counseling, a place to stay. The first time one of our residents, a frail man named Walter, whispered, "Thank you for seeing me," I cried in the parking lot. People asked, of course, "Do you regret it? Loving him? Giving him everything?" At first, I didn't know how to answer. Then, one evening, as I watched the sunset paint the ocean gold, it came to me. I don't regret loving him, I'd say. I regret believing love meant destruction. Jake's descent was public. His drinking worsened. There were mugshots, eviction notices, a GoFundMe that raised $87 before it was flagged for fraud. The last I heard, he was working odd jobs in Nevada, still blaming me for his downfall in drunken rants. I didn't seek out the updates. Some stories aren't worth following to the end. Today, my life is quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from emptiness, but from peace. Barnaby snores at my feet as I write this. The waves crash rhythmically against the shore. And somewhere in Haven Cove, a group of elders, discarded, forgotten, loved, are playing cards in the parlor of Harper's Haven. I sip my tea. The past is a shadow now, not a chain. And for the first time in 60 years, I am free. I am not the woman they left behind. I am the one who walked away and found herself.
Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts. Subscribe now and never miss a story that will leave you speechless.